Has someone ever asked you for tech support, maybe your parents, and then you get to their place, you're looking at their device and you realize, oh, it's just unplugged. You plug the power in and then suddenly their printer turns on and prints off the document that they were looking for? Yeah, you've probably had this experience because most of you are around my age. Anyways, sometimes the solution is obvious. Curse Return, just completely crush Generation 2 with these two overpowered moves, especially with normal types, which are fantastic in this game. But sometimes the solution is something that you would least expect, like hitting the device a couple times, turning it on and off 3 or 4 times, and then suddenly it just starts working. Today we're going to have the pleasure of examining both of these scenarios, a really obvious and good solution, and an extremely weird and janky solution that I have never had to rely on before. In today's video I'm playing Pokemon Crystal with only Furret and Raticate to see which one is better for a solo challenge. These are the rules, and I've also left them in the description so you can check them later on. Okay, now let's talk about these two Pokemon. For stats, Raticate has 55 HP, 97 speed, 81 attack, 50 special attack, 60 defense, and 70 special defense. Its best stat is speed, and it's a physical attacker, which is good because in Generation 2, the normal type deals physical damage. And its level up learn set synergizes well with this. It starts with Tackle, Tail Whip, and Quick Attack. Of course, Quick Attack is the best move of these to be using in the early game. And then it gets access to a better move at only level 13 in the form of Hyper Fang, which has a base power of 80, accuracy of 90, and a secondary chance to cause a flinch. Beyond this, Scary Face and Pursuit probably won't be useful in a solo challenge, but Super Fang is going to have a niche use later on. Through TM and HM, it gets access to a decently wide range of moves. It gets the 3 normal type moves, Headbutt, Return, and Swift, as well as things like Blizzard, Icy Wind, Iron Tail, Thunder, Dig, Shadow Ball, Mud Slap, and Thunderbolt and Ice Beam through the move tutor. While it is nice to have some special moves for coverage with Raticate, I don't think they're going to be that useful, just because its special attack is so low, and the normal typing, along with the Pink Bow and Return, is just so fantastic in Generation 2. Now, both of these Pokemon have a medium fast growth rate, and with that, let's pivot over and talk about Furret. I thought when I sat down to do this challenge that its base stats were going to be much more defensively oriented, but that isn't really the case. It has 85 HP and 90 speed, 76 attack, 45 special attack, 64 defense, and 55 special defense. So Furret is a little bit slower, only by 7 points, but its attack is also only 5 points lower when compared with Raticate, and I think its distribution of stats might be even better, because it has a lower special attack stat, although Furret does lack special defense, and that can be problematic against Red later into the game. But that's where its move pool really comes through for it. It starts with Scratch, Defense Curl, and Quick Attack, a roughly equivalent set to Raticate, but Defense Curl is much better in the early game, especially against the first 3 gym leaders. Then through level up, it doesn't get access to much that's useful. Fury Swipes at 18 and Slam at 28, but Rest at 38 is my favorite move, and Amnesia at level 48 is going to be fantastic for the late game. Also, things get better for Furret because through TM and HM, it doesn't get access to weird moves like Blizzard and Icy Wind. Instead, it gets all the normal type moves, and then a bunch of punches: Dynamic Punch, Ice Punch, Thunder Punch, and Fire Punch. In addition to this coverage, it also gets access to Iron Tail, Dig, Shadow Ball, Mud Slap, as well as moves like Fury Cutter and Surf. So doing a little bit of a preliminary comparison between these two, it seems obvious to me that Furret should perform better. However, let's bring up the tier list as it currently stands, because I do need to talk about normal types in Generation 2. And if you haven't already noticed, I have themed my entire year in Generation 2 around these Pokemon. I started things off with Granbull and Clefable, then I went to Sentret later on, as well as a special interview video based on Kangaskhan. Now we're coming back to the regional rodents, and later in the year I plan to play with some even better normal types. I'm going to promise to all of you that the finale of Crystal version this year is going to be something truly special. Anyways, up until now, normal types have been very dominant overall in the game. Right now, the top 3 spots in the tier list are all occupied by this typing: Granbull, Clefable, and Ursaring. The only reason that a Pokemon like Stantler is in the A tier instead of the S tier is just because it has a slow growth rate, which really does hold it back from extreme success. That said, a single stage Pokemon like Aipom, which doesn't seem particularly outstanding when you just look at it and see its stats, it's actually able to perform decently well, getting a mid-A tier finish, alongside other Pokemon like Mr. Mime, and it's even ahead of the box art legendary Suicune. Remember, within my specific format, I'm ranking by real time, so if I talk about a Pokemon being good or bad, it's always within that context. Now that we have our expectations set, let's get into these playthroughs and see how each of the regional rodents does. I played Furret first because I thought it would perform better just because it has access to Amnesia for the late game. In these versus videos, I like to give the underdog, or at least the perceived underdog, the advantage advantage in the first run. That said, the first playthrough is mostly only just seeing how intuitive these Pokemon are for me. This is very much a personal thing. I'll always do follow-up playthroughs to try and get a better sense for what the objective best strategy is for each Pokemon, but again, I'm a human, I'm flawed, I do make mistakes, and I often miss things. The beauty about doing things this way is that you'll all let me know everything I missed in the comments. And I'm sure in the future I'll come back and stream these Pokemon again and get even better results after incorporating your suggestions. The first detail of this playthrough that I want to draw your attention to is that I needed a nickname that has the same number of characters between both Pokemon. So I chose Fur for Furret and Rat for Raticate, because then my nicknames are Furret. Okay, you'll have to forgive me for that joke. Anyways, the rival's also going to be choosing Chikorita. This is just because it's his strongest team in these playthroughs. The Bayleaf is absolutely terrifying for most Pokemon in Azalea Town, but with these two normal types, I don't anticipate that's going to be an issue today. In the early game, I have to decide on if I'm going to do optional training, and in this case, I decided to do it. These first runs were recorded a long time ago. For example, Furret was recorded on April 20th, 2024. Since then, I have really updated my methodology, and I'm trying to fight Falkner on minimum battles now with most Pokemon, because he's kind of a trash gym leader. And so in these first playthroughs, there's definitely going to be some early game time bloat, but I won't spend extra time discussing it. Even with an extra battle thrown in there, Furret still makes it into the gym and then has to go up against Birdkeeper Abe. Now, I am drawing attention to him because he is typically the most difficult trainer in Falkner's gym. His Spearow is level 9, it has Peck, which is the same type attack bonus move, and all Birdkeepers have the AI modification offensive, meaning they never use status condition moves. Essentially, this Spearow is just going to spam Peck against you. Luckily though, Furret has the defense and HP to pull through and defeat it on its first attempt. After that, I defeat Birdkeeper Rod, who is not an issue, and that brings Furret up to level 8 before Falkner. Okay, this fight's extremely straightforward if you have a Pokemon that isn't weak to Mud Slap and also knows a defense boosting move. For Furret, I can just raise my defenses with Defense Curl. They are never going to use Mud Slap against me, so my accuracy is going to be intact. And after setting up, which I only go to +3 to save time, then I start using Quick Attack, and this simple sequence of events gives me an easy victory over the Flying type specialist. This victory also comes with some major advantages: a 12.5% boost to my attack stat, and access to the TM for Mud Slap. In the early game of Pokemon Crystal, this tends to be most Pokemon's solution for the rivals Ghastly in Azalea Town. And for both Furret and Raticate, that is the case. Please keep this in mind for later because it is going to be relevant in one of my follow-up playthroughs. Heading south, I make what I would consider to be a mistake today, which is fighting trainers before Union Cave. The reason I'm doing this is because I wanted to level up enough for Bugsy to ensure that Fury Cutter was never going to get too out of control. All of that said, I have now reconsidered this because Furret doesn't need the training. I'm also doing more in Union Cave, again just a mistake. Furret already has a solution for Bugsy, and I don't need to rely on over-leveling. So I'm playing these first runs as safely as possible, and another factor in that is that I go into the basement of Union Cave to pick up the TM for Swift. I've recently been joining Speedrunner and Steve M Plays doing some of their race backports. This format I have found to be so much fun, and it really does teach me which places my route is slightly inefficient. For example, picking up Swift here does give me a more powerful move, but if it isn't absolutely required for damage ranges on Bugsy and the rival, then skipping it is the best idea because you get access to Headbutt just after in the forest. Inside of Bugsy's gym, I complete my additional training fighting this bug catcher with 3 Pokemon. The Beedrill is decent experience, so sometimes fighting him does make sense. Leaving this battle, my Furret is level 15 over a damage rounding threshold. I heal up, and now it's time for the second gym leader. Okay, I said Defense Curl was good in the early game for a reason. I can set up against his Metapod for free all the way until +6. Yes, my speed is getting lowered, and the Metapod can damage me with Tackle. It can also set up Harden, meaning it'll take longer to knock out, but all of this doesn't matter. I just want to make it to the Scyther and know that Fury Cutter is going to deal very little damage per hit. I didn't want to waste too much time here, so I just set up to +4 and then knock the Metapod out with 2 attacks. After that, it's time for the Kakuna, and it presents a small problem. Sometimes it can inflict poison with Poison Sting. If you've seen my Tyranitar stream, you'll know that this can be really frustrating. Luckily, it doesn't occur here, it just sets up with Harden, and I knock it out in 2 turns. Alright, time for the Scyther, and here you're going to see its amazing move choice. First turn it goes for Quick Attack, then it Quick Attacks again. This is not doing very much to me, and I think it's prioritizing this move because it has more raw damage when compared with Fury Cutter's first turn. Either way, it doesn't really matter because my Swifts are doing more than enough damage, and in only 3 turns, Bugsy's Ace faints. By the way, when this this video went early access for the supporters of this channel on Patreon and through YouTube memberships. Snowy left a comment for me stating that the AI does not choose the move Fury Cutter or Rollout because of damage. It has other logic by which it picks these moves. So they suggest that it's just luck that it was choosing Quick Attack. Okay, rival time. For this I have to use Mud Slap to knock out the Ghastly. There is a loss condition here, which is it puts me to sleep with Hypnosis, then spams Spite until I have no more PP left, and that would prevent me from knocking the Ghost type out. This doesn't happen, instead it just goes for Spite right away, so I get a second turn in, moving on to the Zubat. Swift doesn't one hit, Furret gets confused, hits itself, tanks a bite, and then knocks out his Flyer. Okay, Bayleaf time. This thing has Razor Leaf, which is a increased critical hit move. It also gets the same type attack bonus, and its base power is 55. Not to mention, the first turn after taking a third in damage, he sets up Reflect so that my Swifts are doing even less damage. I was very worried Razor Leaf was going to crit, but it just doesn't. 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns. Furret is now on 8 hit points, but that is just enough because it has 1 more Swift in it and Bayleaf faints. Okay, now that I've reached the forest, I can chase the Farfetch'd around, and once I've done this task, I can head back to the town, talk to this guy, and get myself a free charcoal. This is a suboptimal play, but it will give me access to more money in Goldenrod City, and I want that so that I can specifically buy all 3 of the punches right away. After that, in the forest, I grab Headbutt, and I teach it in the place of Quick Attack, because for now, I want to keep Defense Curl. In Goldenrod City, after selling the charcoal, I buy all of the punches. I have more than enough money to do this, but I'm left over with 1,500 Poké Dollars. This is relevant, because once I explore the underground and defeat a few trainers down here, I'm going to need to still have 2,000 Poké Dollars so that I can purchase myself an Abra for the field move in the game corner. With it on my side, I head north of the city to do a little bit of a mandatory excursion. You have to talk to Floria in Crystal version. You don't have to do this in Gold and Silver. Plus, there's another reason to come over here. In the National Park, I can pick up the TM for Dig, which Furret can learn, and I place it in the place of Mud Slap. With the bag open, I teach Ice Punch in the place of Swift, and now I'm ready to head back to Goldenrod City to face Whitney. I want to mention there are essentially 3 potential options for Furret in this fight. Her Miltank has 48 speed, so since I'm moving first, I could just permanently flinch it and take an easy victory. Another potential solution is setting up my defense with Defense Curl on the Clefairy, and I did opt to go for this. The third strategy is that once the Miltank goes for Rollout, I can use Dig to break its combo so that it never stacks up its damage. There are some other things that I could potentially do here. I could freeze with Ice Punch, but that seems luck-based and I didn't want to do that. There's also the potential of picking up the Rollout TM north of the city and then using that in combination with Defense Curl. However, I was happy with my current moveset, so I didn't think I needed Rollout, plus it's slightly suboptimal to have to go off the path to grab that TM and also spend the time teaching it. Beyond Whitney, it becomes less and less useful, and I would have to teach Ice Punch or Dig in its place anyways, bloating my time even more. Of course, Headbutt and Dig together are more than enough. I flinch the Miltank once, and then knock it out, earning myself the 3rd badge. And this one is very important for normal types. It gives a 12.5% boost to my speed stat, and it also gives a 12.5% boost to all normal type moves. So Headbutt now has an effective power of 118. It should be obvious to all of you that Furret is not going to have problems throughout the next section of the game. So I want to spend this time talking about playing safely in Pokemon Crystal. Again, this is over safe, so I pick up the Magnet, which I don't end up using throughout the rest of the playthrough. I just wanted it in case I needed the boost to electric type damage. I probably could have sat down and thought through the route a little bit more before this playthrough and then known that I wouldn't need it. Another thing that I do very commonly in my first playthroughs is I head all the way to Olivine City before coming back to Ecruteak City to face the rival in the Burned Tower. I do this because number 1, I can grab the Mint Berry so that I have a way to wake up from Hypnosis in the fight against Morty, and I also get all the experience in the Lighthouse, which levels my Pokemon up more for the rival. This is also the moment where I get to face Dennis in the Lighthouse, and I should mention that he is mandatory in my playthroughs. It's sort of an unspoken rule, but in every single Crystal playthrough I do fight him, even when I'm trying to push myself to get a personal best. With him defeated, I head back to Burned Tower and take on the rival. I have Dig, which is able to manage the Haunter in a single hit. And by this point, I've also taught my Furret Fire Punch. It's going to be useful against Price as well as Jasmine, and it is kind of helpful here against the rival. Both it and Ice Punch are good against the Bayleaf. I end up going for Ice Punch just in case it freezes. It doesn't, and it does take 3 turns, but Bayleaf only went for Poison Powder on the first turn, and Razor Leaf doesn't inflict inflict very much damage. Inside the Raticate City gym, I face Sage Ping, who has 5 Ghastly. It seems that here I could be going slightly faster by using Ice Punch or Fire Punch against all of these weak ghost types, but that isn't the case. Those moves have a 52% chance to knock out, whereas Dig has a 100% chance. What I really didn't want to have happen was get hit by Curse early into the battle and then have my health sapped away by the volatile status condition. Also, if I use Dig for reliable damage after getting cursed, then I'll be taking even more every single time I knock out a Ghastly. That didn't seem like it was worth it, so again, I'm playing very safely here. At the end of the battle, I could have gone for some riskier Ice Punches, but I just finish everything out with Dig. After all, I've collected a lot of ethers to this point in the playthrough. There are 4 that are available, so I can use one of those to replenish Dig's PP before taking on Morty. At least that's what I should have done, but I completely forgot. I go into the battle and I only have 1 PP left of the ground type move. So in this case, I had to use Ice Punch and it's not doing enough damage to even one-shot the first Ghastly. So whoops, I'm gonna have to use the Ether now. Of course, Dig is gonna be the solution for Morty. It one-shots both the first Ghastly and the first Haunter, leading me to the Gengar, which is usually his most intimidating Pokemon. But as a normal type, its only damage-dealing move is Dream Eater, meaning it has to hit a Hypnosis first. But since I have a Mint Berry, it can't put me to sleep, giving me a free knockout. Essentially, after I use my Ether, this battle is free. So that first reset is extremely painful and entirely player error. In these videos, I'm always trying to improve my communication. I'm also trying to do it in life as well. Communicating with other people is a really hard thing to do. Anyway, this comment talks about ways in which I can communicate terminology around decision making and plays in a run. P. Zansei says that in the chess world, they use something called the ordinal scale. He says it has by-the-book plays as baseline, with strong plays being classified as good, excellent, and best, as well as great and brilliant for specifically outstanding plays, whereas imperfect play is rated on a scale of inaccuracy, mistake, and blunder. It's going to take me a while to get familiar with this terminology and really start utilizing it day to day in my playthroughs, so let's get some practice right now. Against Morty, not using an Ether, I think it's a blunder. It definitely seems more impactful than just a simple mistake. A mistake might be like, I don't know, going to the lighthouse when I should be facing the rival. It loses some time, but it's overall not that impactful. Inaccuracy might be something like selecting the wrong move and then the opponent uses something useless or just misses. So it's inaccuracy, but it doesn't really impact the playthrough overall. Okay, so I decided to go to Chuck next, and I am really hoping that this is not a mistake or a blunder. After all, I'm a normal type, but I felt fairly confident that Furret would still be able to get it done. Inside the gym, I have to take on the tag team trainers, the first of which has a Hitmonlee. I always fight him initially so that I see how much damage it does with its moves like Jump Kick. In this case, it takes Furret all the way down to orange health before I knock it out with my second attack. I still have to defeat the second trainer though with his Hitmonchan. In this case, he gets a critical hit with Fire Punch. Luckily, it does not do enough damage and I manage to pull through. Nob is next. He has 2 fighting types, but Furret doesn't struggle against them. That levels me up to 30, and now it's time to take on Chuck. Okay, so my strategy for this fight is fairly simple. I just want to get flinches with Headbutt. Sometimes the Primeape can mess you up going for Leer, and then the Poliwrath's Dynamic Punch does too much, knocking your Pokemon out, but in this case it just uses Fury Swipes and I take it out over 2 turns. Alright, time for the Poliwrath, let's see if I can do this. I'm hoping Chuck goes for Mind Reader, that would be ideal on the first turn. He does, taking aim. My next Headbutt does not cause a flinch, but it gets a critical hit and Chuck's ace goes down. Okay, so coming back to the ordinal scale, I do think there needs to be like a third axis for Pokemon playthroughs, because in chess you don't really get lucky, but in these runs you do. So like, I don't know, how do we measure luck? It's like on one end you get very unlucky, on the other end you get very lucky. I actually think this is somewhere in the middle, because Chuck is generally quite inconsistent and Headbutt is pretty decent at causing flinches, and I really only think I needed 1 if the Primeape didn't go for Leer. So I think this luck is somewhere around baseline, maybe a little bit more towards the lucky side. Now that I have Fly, I can collect a bunch of useful items. Well, I thought I was going to, but I didn't actually pick up Kenya. This is a blunder. I now have to head back over the sea and on foot to Goldenrod City to pick up my HM user. Although, while I am in Goldenrod City, I'm going to spend the time to grab the TM for return and teach it in place of Headbutt for an increase in base power. It's only 6 effective power right now, but over the rest of the run, this is going to increase. I also head back to the first route of the game, Route 29, to pick up the Pink Bow. This is where I want to talk about a binary of plays being optimal or plays being suboptimal. In Pokemon Crystal, there is a minimum number of steps that you have to take to get through the entire game, and there are also a minimum number of battles that you need to complete. Completing the game on minimum steps and minimum battles is the optimal play. Of course, this is very theoretical, but I think that we can describe most plays generally as optimal or suboptimal. An optimal play is, say, fighting the Kimono Girls, then fighting the rival in Burned Tower, defeating Morty, and then going to the lighthouse. There is no time spent backtracking through a region twice, like going to the lighthouse first, and then coming back and facing the rival in Burned Tower, which means I have to go through the routes connecting to Olivine City 2 times instead of just once. Whenever I diverge from the optimal pathing, I want to try and let you know about it, so this case to pick up the pink bow is definitely leaning towards safety and not towards optimal play. After all, the optimal play to obtain the pink bow is picking it up in the radio tower after you defeat all the rockets. Yeah, I bet a bunch of you didn't know that there are 2 of these items available to the player in the game. There's also another version of this item called the polka dot bow. It does the exact same thing. It is exclusive to Generation 2, and it can only be obtained by trading a Jigglypuff from Generation 1 into Generation 2. So that's your trivia for this video. I was buying time while I completed the rocket plotline. With it finished, now let's head into the gym battle against Price. Remember how I said Fire Punch is useful against him? Yeah, that's only theoretically, because Return's damage is just far better than all of the punches. Plus his Dugong is part water type, so Fire Punch doesn't make sense here either. I think the one risk for Furret in this entire fight is if the Dugong lowers your attack with Aurora Beam, and then if the Piloswine freezes you with Blizzard. Well, what's the chance of that happening? Honestly, it's pretty low. The Aurora Beam doesn't lower my attack, and the Piloswine just uses Fury Attack, which it is known to do. It seems to like this move more than the other ones. I know that Snowy said it has equal opportunity to use any of them, but it always feels like Price really likes to use Fury Attack the first turn the Piloswine is in battle. And if it doesn't, he's always trying to set up with Mist. Either way though, my feelings aren't accurate here, but Furret is with Return, and it knocks out his ace in 2 turns. Okay, so now it's time for the playthrough to get more difficult. My normal type has to go up against the Steel type specialist. Jasmine is, in most of these playthroughs, the most difficult gym leader in the entire game. That said, I think Furret with its moveset is fairly prepared for this fight. Dig is going to counter out the Magnemites, and Fire Punch is good for the Steelix because it's special damage, and even though my special attack stat is not very good, I did just get a special boost from Price's badge, and Steelix's special defense is not very good. It's about 1/3 of what its physical defense is. Okay, so let's see how it went. First of all, the question is, will she send out both of her Magnemites before the Steelix? Of course, Dig is going to one-hit, but I also noticed that Fire Punch has the correct damage range as well, so I don't even need to spend extra turns here against her initial 2 Pokemon, because she does send in the Magnemites first. Steelix is last. I go for Fire Punch, and it does what looks like half, maybe slightly less. It hits with an Iron Tail doing about 1/3, and then my second Fire Punch fails to get the knockout. This means she gets in 1 more Iron Tail, lowers Furret's defense, then uses a Hyper Potion bringing Steelix back to full health. My next Fire Punch does less damage, so my 4th fails to get the knockout again, and Steelix lands 1 more Iron Tail, finishing Furret. Okay, so if we're going to rank this on the ordinal scale, I think it would be inaccuracy. I could have gone back to Azalea Town and purchased myself a Charcoal before doing this fight. That might have given me enough damage to 2-hit the Steelix, but I wanted to try it without that backtracking because it is suboptimal. That brings up a really interesting tension in these playthroughs. For instance, the inaccurate play is not going back and getting the Charcoal, which could have given me a win there, but it's also the suboptimal play, so the optimal play is just, say, getting a critical hit or a burn against the Steelix. That would have given me the victory at this level. I also could potentially use rare candies right now, but that feels a little bit premature, not knowing how Furret's damage ranges are going to play out, especially against the Elite Four. I think once I get past them and into Kanto, this run is going to become significantly easier. Okay, so I've talked a lot. Steelix gets me again and again. This is really not going well. I also then have a blunder using Return on the Magnemite, which doesn't work, and I get paralyzed by Thunder Wave, taking another quick reset. That is the 5th one in this playthrough. So now let's talk about Return, because it is actually useful in this fight. I can do chip damage to the Steelix, then hit with Fire Punch, and I was hoping that by doing things this way, Jasmine wouldn't use her Hyper Potion. But unfortunately she does. It looks like the threshold she uses it at is whenever the Steelix falls below 50% health, which is very unfortunate. unfortunate for me. So I'm fighting from really bad position now. My next Fire Punch does almost half again. Then the next one rolls about the same damage, so I am not able to knock out the Steelix. However, Iron Tail is trash, it misses, and that gives Furret the victory over the Steel type specialist. This is not a satisfying victory, and I'm going to need a better plan for my second run, but for now, I'm going to take the win. By the way, I really wanted to insert a segment here that was talking about how the AI chooses what it's going to do. I wanted to figure out the exact chance that Jasmine was going to use her Hyper Potions, but it turns out the AI is very complicated in Generation 2, and I think I needed an entire video just to describe how all of it works. For example, Jasmine and every other gym leader have 7 AI modifications, and she also has 2 additional modifications, which is Context Use and Switch Sometimes. By the way, if you want to poke through this code yourself, the Context Use is the one that gets checked when she decides if she's going to use a potion or not. Okay, let's continue with the run. In the radio tower, I have the chance to learn Rest, which I considered, but I decided against it because I think my current moveset is capable of taking on the next section of the game. At the top of the first part of radio tower, I have to take on Petrol, who is by far the scariest rocket in the entire game. When holding the pink bow, I have a 71% chance to knock out the Coughings, but I crit the second and the third one. From there, I knock the Wheezing out in 2 turns and then get lucky damage rolls against the final 2 Coughings. The rival in the underground is next. Now the Golbat doesn't go down to a single attack, which sometimes causes problems if it chooses to set up Confuse Ray, but it just goes for wing attack in this case. Beyond that, the rest of his team is easier to defeat. I have Fire Punch for the Magnemite, Dig for the Haunter, Return crits the Sneasel, and his Ace Meganium is much like a football player from high school. It has definitely fallen off from its glory days when it was a Bayleaf back in Azalea Town. After completing the basement, I grab some additional TMs so that I have flexibility with my punches, and I also pick up some vitamins, 3 calcium, and 1 protein. I crush the final rocket members and then journey through Ice Path towards Blackthorn City. On my way, I pick up the Nevermelt Ice so it can boost the damage of Ice Punch. This typically isn't useful against Claire, who's next. It's far more useful against Lance because his Dragonites take 4 times damage from Ice Punch. The better solution for the gym leader coming up next is going to be Return, because with the pink bow, it's going to do better damage against all of her Dragonairs. This fight tends to be fairly binary. As long as I'm one-hitting her first 3 Pokemon, then I'm not at risk to the final Kingdra. The worst case scenario here is I fail a damage range and then one of the Dragonairs uses Thunder Wave, cutting my Pokemon's consistency, as well as its speed. But with Return and the Pink Bow, Furret has a 100% chance to knock out all 3 of the Dragonairs and a guaranteed 2-hit on the Kingdra. The worst thing it could do is Smokescreen. It doesn't, just choosing Surf, which does about a third. Claire does heal with a Hyper Potion, but this doesn't matter. After 2 hits, her ace goes down, and I've earned myself the 8th and final badge in Johto. Okay, let's continue talking about suboptimal plays. Grabbing the rare candy in the Whirl Islands, as well as the one in Mount Mortar, are both within this category. It is of course optimal to skip these entirely, but I never feel safe doing that in first playthroughs, at least I haven't up until now. I think in the future with really good Pokemon, I will start skipping them because they're a decent time investment. I also wanted to play quite safe, so I end up battling 1 optional trainer just before Victory Road. But then I wasn't going slow enough against the rival, and I have a input mistake, accidentally moving the cursor past Dig back to Return, so I don't knock out his Magneton, and it does the worst possible thing, which is hitting me with Thunder Wave. Now that I'm paralyzed and confused, for it hits itself, I get inflicted by a curse from the Haunter, and everything falls apart and I take a reset. I think that player error gets categorized first as inaccuracy, but then it kind of becomes a mistake, and maybe even a blunder, because that reset was quite painful. I ended up making it all the way to the Kadabra. Luckily, I can even use Fire Punch against the Magneton and just one-shot it. His final Pokemon is Meganium, and remember, it has really fallen off. Okay, so Furret's ready for the league, and for reasons that will become apparent soon, we are not going to go back and look at Raticate. We are just going to keep going with this normal type and see how it does. Will is up first, I go for Return, and I figured I would have enough damage, but the Xatu survives. It lands a Psychic, doing about a quarter, and then Jinx comes in. Now it's frail enough that I do get the one-shot. This levels Furret up to 48, and now I have to teach it Amnesia if I want access to it in the late game. In Johto, ground-type moves are not particularly good against the league, so I'm going to teach Amnesia in its place. Executor is next. Despite Ice Punch and Fire Punch both being super effective, Return still does more damage, but not enough to KO. Its Psychic Psychic does massive damage, bringing Furret down to orange health, and it also drops my special defense, which is really bad because Slowbro sees that it has more damage, so instead of setting up with Curse or Amnesia like it normally does, it just attacks with Psychic and Furret faints. Alright, I think the saying is that my bingo card did not have Furret having a reset against Will on it when I first set out to do this challenge, but yeah, it happened, so that's kind of unfortunate. In the next fight, I get confused by the Xatu and take damage once again. Luckily, by the time I make it to the Executor, I snap out. It once again hits with another massive Psychic and drops my special defense. Okay, so enough of this. While I am about to level up to 48, I did save inside of the Elite Four, so I don't want to black out. Instead, I'm just going to use my rare candies now. I shouldn't need the extra 1 level at the very end of the game. I think Furret is prepared. I'm also only going to use 6 rare candies to go up over a damage rounding threshold at level 53. This should be more than enough for Will. I can now one-hit the first Xatu, dodging all of its annoyances, and then the Executor just sets up Leech Seed instead of attacking. The Slowbro also chooses to go for Curse, giving me a 2-hit with Return, and the final Xatu is a 1-hit. Those 6 rare candies took this fight from tricky to completely trivial. Okay, Koga's next. You might have wondered, why not keep Dig for him? Well, his poison types are not really that weak to ground types. Venomoth takes neutral damage from it, of course, because it's a psychic type. The Fortress and the Ariados also take neutral damage from it, and the Crobat is a flying type, so it takes no damage from Dig. That leaves only the Muck, which takes super effective damage from Dig, and Return is just far better against it. The only way I could lose here is if evasion boosting moves give him an edge with luck, but they don't, and I defeat him, moving on to Bruno. This is where things usually get really tricky for normal types. I'm not scared about the Hitmontop. Its only move that can attack us is Quick Attack. The Hitmonlee is slower and it's frail, so I'm gonna one-shot, but the Hitmonchan has priority in the form of Mach Punch, and it gets a critical hit, doing almost half to Furret. I'm gonna lose now if the Machamp hits a Cross Chop, and it pulls it off. Right now Furret is level 54, so I can use my final rare candy to boost it up to 55 over a damage rounding threshold, but I don't think this is really what I need to win. It appears right now I have to wait for the Cross Chop to miss, otherwise I'm just not going to be able to win here. The damage rounding threshold does not give me a 1-hit on the Machamp, and because for a second time in a row the Hitmonchan crit with Mach Punch, the Machamp's Cross Chop gets Furret. Okay, while we try to luck through Bruno, let me talk about what the fastest way to beat these games is. It typically is the case if only one trainer is difficult for your Pokemon, that it is far better to just luck through them, having like 5 to 10 resets, rather than doing the training that would be required to beat them consistently. For Furret, it only needs to do half damage to the Machamp to get a lucky win with a Cross Chop miss, so I could beat Bruno at a much lower level, saving more time throughout the playthrough. But it's also worth considering what level I would need to be to get the consistent one-shot against the Machamp. Right now at level 55 with the Pink Bow I do between 81 and 96% damage to it with every hit from Return. If I go over the next damage rounding threshold to 58, only 3 levels higher, then I have a 42.5% chance to knock it out in a single hit. And at level 60 I have a 73.7% chance. However, that's 5 levels higher, and in Johto it's going to take a lot of time to get those levels. So if you're wondering why I'm not blacking out against Machamp, it's because I truly believe that it's going to be faster to just beat him this way. Also, it turns out that Furret can survive the Cross Chop. It does with 14 hit points, and that's what ends up giving me the win. So there was another path to victory, not just waiting for the miss. Bruno's last Pokemon is Onix. Luckily, I have Ice Punch, which deals with it in a single hit. And I can't believe I'm going to say this, but this is not the last time I'm going to talk about Bruno's Onix. Yeah, it's going to come for me later in this video. For now though, I'm moving on to Karen. In this case, I get my accuracy dropped by Sand Attack on the first turn by the Umbreon. Really annoying. This battle always starts like that, and then I basically have to luck through. Unfortunately, I don't have the damage I need to one-shot the Vileplume, so it paralyzes me. I didn't bring the Paralyzed Cure Berry, and of course I haven't taught Rest, so I'm gonna have to take the status condition throughout the rest of the fight. And that complicates things because the Gengar does not fall to a single Ice Punch even after it uses Curse. So now I have a volatile status condition, I have a non-volatile status condition, and I have an accuracy drop. This fight is obviously a loss. Thing is, I got a little bit unlucky in the last fight because I have a 71% chance to knock out the Vileplume in one hit when using Return. When that happens, it isn't able to Stun Spore me and I can move on to the Gengar. Even though it curses me, I'm able to knock it out before I take damage from the volatile status condition. That's because it doesn't deal damage to the Pokemon on the first turn it becomes active, and it also doesn't deal damage to the Pokemon when you knock the enemy out. So, as long as I don't miss, I'm not going to take damage from it. I hit the Murkrow with Return, one-shotting, so that leaves only the Houndoom, and once again Furret is accurate enough to pull through with the victory. Okay, to prepare prepare for Lance, there's only one thing to do, teach Thunder Punch in the place of Fire Punch. Now, let's take on the champion. I was assuming this fight was going to be fairly straightforward. Thunder Punch does 4 times damage to the Gyarados, and I expected a one-hit. But I just barely don't get it. It survives on a sliver. Luckily, it just sets up Rain Dance. It always does this, and I knock it out for free on the next turn. But I'm a little bit concerned now with the Dragonites. Ice Punch does have a higher effective power when compared with Thunder Punch because Price's badge is boosting the power of Ice-type moves, whereas Surge's badge is needed to boost the power of Thunder Punch. That said, the Dragonites have better stats when compared with the Gyarados, so they are also able to survive a single hit from Ice Punch. This leads to the first one paralyzing me with Thunder Wave, and I didn't want to chance through the rest of the fight with the status condition, so I take a quick reset. I came back into the fight holding the Never Melt Ice to boost the power of Ice Punch, hoping this would give me the one-shot on the Dragonites. And it does. Well, at least for the first one. Against the second one I get a snowy damage roll, and with that I move on to the Aerodactyl. Ice Punch is the best move for me to use against it, and I get lucky here again, freezing. Because of that, it goes down for free over 2 turns. Charizard goes down to a single return, and that leaves only his final Dragonite. With the Never Melt Ice, I don't have enough damage to one-shot. It survives with a tiny sliver, but it just chooses Safeguard, and with that, Lance is defeated. A league time of 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 5 seconds is okay. It's not the best. A truly outstanding performance in Crystal version would be somewhere near the low 50-minute time for a league finish. Even a 40-minute time I think is possible with some outstanding Pokemon. For example, I'm expecting some of the normal types I play later in the year to get one of those times. But for a first playthrough with Furret, which has been quite messy until this point, I have a total of 14 resets. This is a decent time still. And don't worry, Furret is not going to get slowed down in the near future because Kanto is next. This is the simple part of the game. All of the gym leaders here are complete pushovers for most Pokemon. I want to talk again about suboptimal and optimal plays here. So, in Johto, the optimal play is to never change your held item because it just wastes time to open the inventory and equip a new item. If you have the damage ranges required with your current movesets, don't remove your item, just leave it whatever it is. This means with a lot of playthroughs, I end up holding the Never Melt Ice throughout this entire section of the game because it saves time to just never change it out. You might think that I'm going to equip the leftovers for the late game, and yes I am. I'm going to play as generically as possible with Furret because it's outstanding using this strategy, just wait to witness it. So you might wonder why not just equip the leftovers right away to take on gym leaders like Surge and Brock and Blaine. Well, the reason is, whenever the leftovers heals your health, it prints text and also animates the HP bar, which wastes time. So it's actually conserving time by leaving the Never Melt Ice in its place and not equipping the leftovers until the battles where I really think that it's going to be necessary. And typically the first one of these is the battle against Blue. For it, I'm also going to change up my moveset, teaching Curse in the place of Thunder Punch before equipping the leftovers in the place of the Never Melt Ice. Okay, so check out this strategy against Blue. It's absolutely ridiculous. I can set up with Curse against the Pidgeot because it only has physical moves, and for some reason, I think because of his AI modifications, he never chooses to go for Whirlwind, switching my Furret out. This always seems consistent. I always get asked why not deposit your HM users before battles like this, and the reason is quite simple. It's suboptimal. If you know you can play around Whirlwind, setting up twice and then still have the damage ranges required, don't deposit your HM users because it's suboptimal. It wastes time both storing them in the PC and then withdrawing them later when you have to fly to Pallet Town and then back to Viridian City. Okay, now that I've set up with Curse, this strategy gets truly bonkers because I can set up also with Amnesia. At this point, my Furret is essentially invulnerable. The only way I can see it getting knocked out is if his Pokemon get critical hits. The Alakazam sees that its damage range using Psychic is very bad now that I've set up so much, so it sets up with Reflect, but still, Return has enough damage. Rhydon is next. I saved Ice Punch just for this thing. I one-hit with a critical hit, then Gyarados comes out. It sees that it has bad damage ranges, choosing Rain Dance instead of attacking. I one-shot, move on to the Executor, which sets up with Leech Seed. I hope you can see what happens when you set up your defenses in Generation 2. The AI just spams status conditions and does almost nothing to you. Well, until the Arcanine. This one also knows Roar, but it does not spam the status condition. Again, I think Blue's AI deprioritizes these moves. As a result, it attacks in with extreme speed, doing truly pathetic damage, 9 hit points. And with that, my final return lands, and blue is defeated. Okay, there's only one trainer left, and I did play safely and suboptimally here, grabbing the rare candy just before Mount Silver. I really don't think this was necessary, but I wanted to make sure I was the maximum possible level that I could be before red. I have 3 candies left over, so I'm level 69, which hopefully is going to be nice enough. Okay, final battle, Pikachu's first. This is simple. Set up with Amnesia first so that Thunder does almost no damage. Then the only way I can lose is if it crits me. Beyond that, I can take my time setting up with Curse, healing with Rest if I need to, and then I should be able to sweep his team. Once I'm fully set up, I heal one last time, and then I strike back with Return, knocking out his lead. Okay, if he doesn't get a critical hit, I should win. Espeon goes for Psychic, does almost nothing. Snorlax is next, it sets up with Amnesia because my health is high. Then Venusaur tries Solar Beam, but it doesn't have time to ever land the attack. Charizard's Flamethrower is shrugged off by Furret, leaving only Blastoise. It sets up with Rain Dance, wasting its turn, and I knock it out. That gives Furret a first playthrough time of 1 hour, 21 minutes, and 32 seconds. With 14 resets, 0 blackouts at level 70 with a game time of 4 hours and 54 minutes. Okay, not bad for Furret. I would say it's a little bit less consistent than I thought it would be up until Lance, but after that it steamrolled the game. I think this is good news for me because typically Pokemon perform poorly in Pokemon Crystal if they really struggle against blue or red. For my second run, I have a lot more tools available to me, such as Hidden Power, so I don't think Furret is going to struggle in a follow-up playthrough. So now let's see how Raticate did in its first playthrough. In the early game, I don't fight any wild Pokemon, and I make it to Birdkeeper Abe at level 6. Now, this is where we're going to see the first difference between these Pokemon. Remember, his Spearow spams Peck, and Raticate using Quick Attack is going to knock it out in 4 turns. If the Spearow gets a critical hit, I think Raticate loses this battle, but if it doesn't, with a berry, I'm able to pull through and move on to the next Birdkeeper, and after finishing him, I get to Falkner at level 8, the same level that Furret fought him at. I thought Raticate with lower HP and defense might struggle here against Falkner, but it turns out his bird Pokemon are just not doing enough damage. With the berry, I have more than enough health to pull through, provided he doesn't get a bunch of critical hits. Now, I said before I wanted to save the Raticate footage until after Furret, and that's because I recorded this footage with splits comparisons between the 2 playthroughs. So you can see every time I beat a major trainer with Raticate, we are going to compare its split with Furret's first playthrough splits. This way we can better track Raticate's progress and see if it's on track to beat Furret. And right now it has a lead, 30 seconds over Furret. It also gains more advantages when compared to Furret in the next section of the game, because while it does learn Swift, which I didn't skip, it also gets Hyper Fang early on, and this move is fantastic. The only downside is it has a 10% chance to miss, but I am going to be relying on it against Bugsy because I don't have access to Defense Curl. Without it, there's no point setting up. I was hoping I wouldn't get hit by the Metapod or the Kakuna. Poison would be the worst case scenario here. String Shot doesn't matter because Raticate already had less speed than the Scyther, so let's see how it goes. It chooses Fury Cutter on the first turn, doing 5 hit points of damage, and my Hyper Fang does a little bit more than a third. The next Fury Cutter stacks up damage, taking me down to 33 hit points. Hyper Fang brings the Scyther down to red health, and I'm really proud of myself here because sometimes I forget priority moves in moments like this, but today I don't. I choose Quick Attack and Scyther feints. Okay, Raticate's still ahead by almost half a minute, 27 seconds in the lead right now. I don't have problems with the rival's Ghastly using Hypnosis and Spite to drain Mudslap's PP, and from there Raticate just kind of stomps him. It's doing better damage against the Bayleaf, and I'm able to 2-hit. Also, it chose to attack, I think because my lower special defense stat. As a result, it doesn't set up Reflect, and that gives me a 2-hit with Hyper Fang. Just like Furret, Raticate can learn Dig, so I'm going to do that before I face Whitney. I want to ensure that I have a way to break Rollout's combo that isn't just getting flinches with Headbutt. I tried to go for the more aggressive strategy here, choosing Hyper Fang, but it misses. Miltank sets up with Rollout, and I use Dig to break the combo. While this ground type move doesn't do very much damage, and Miltank does use Rollout again, I decided to go for Hyper Fang, and I get a lucky flinch, breaking the combo, and this is what gives me the victory. Once again, I remember Quick Attack, knocking out her ace when it's on low health. Alright, so this section of the game, Raticate is losing a little bit of time. It's now only 18 seconds ahead against Furret, but this makes for a really fun and close race. However, there are some big differences between these two Pokemon coming up in the next section of the game, because as you can see from Raticate's current moveset, it just doesn't have the type diversity that Furret had access to. My set is currently Hyper Fang, Quick Attack, Headbutt, and Dig. Still, these moves are more than enough to carry me throughout the next section of the game. I play play safely, going to the lighthouse first before defeating the rival in Burned Tower. With a higher attack stat in the Mint Berry, Morty is no issue for Raticate. After this battle, I am now 1 minute and 21 seconds ahead of Furret's pace. I think the lead that I gained here is largely because I wasn't mucking around with my set, teaching TMs and things like that, but Raticate's slightly higher attack stat might be giving it slightly more one-hits in this section of the game, speeding up the progress in every battle. Another way my progress is going to improve in this section of the game when compared with Furret is because I didn't forget Kenya, so when I make it to Chuck's gym, as long as I don't have resets here, I think Raticate's going to pull into a major lead. However, that's saying a lot because the trainers in here are very scary, especially with a lower defense stat. However, my attack is an advantage because Hyperfang is able to one-shot the Hitmonlee, so I don't even sustain damage from it. The Hitmonchan does attack with Ice Punch, luckily it doesn't freeze me, and then I knock it out. Nob is where things get a little bit concerning. The Machop hits with Seismic Toss, and then it survives my Hyperfang and hits with Karate Chop, bringing Raticate down to 7 hit points. Okay, so I need to crit the Machoke or flinch it. I'm not sure if Headbutt would have had enough damage to one hit, so I tried to go for Hyperfang. It misses, and Machoke finishes me with Rock Slide. This reset is unfortunate. I have to go back all the way before the tag team trainers because I didn't save in front of Nob. I rarely do because he's not really an issue unless you're weak to rock type moves, in the case of like Ho-Oh or Delibird, where Rock Slide hits like a truck. In the next battle, I'm able to one-shot the Machop, which makes things so much easier. From there, the Machoke does more than half with Karate Chop, but it's not enough to give me a second reset. Raticate's lower defensive stats are on display against the next trainer because his Mankey and Primeape do more damage to Raticate than I was expecting, and as a result I have to go back to the Pokemon Center to heal before I'm ready for Chuck. Okay, buckle up because this is quite the fight. The Primeape goes for Leer, and it fails. I knock it out with Quick Attack, move on to the Poliwrath, which I choose Headbutt against, figuring I'm gonna flinch at least once. The Poliwrath goes for Dynamic Punch, it just misses. My next Headbutt once again fails the flinch. Poliwrath uses Dynamic Punch, and it misses again, giving Raticate a clean sweep. Yeah, Chuck missed 3 moves in a row. Honestly, a terrible performance from him. Still, the reset to Nob was costly, so Raticate is only 6 seconds ahead of Furret at this point. But I don't have to backtrack for Kenya, so that saves some time. Skipping over the Rocket plotline, I haven't taught Return yet. I'm gonna fight Price. Headbutt and Hyperfang are more than enough here. Without having to go back for Kenya, I'm now 1 minute and 35 seconds ahead, but Raticate doesn't have access to Fire Punch, and I anticipate that that's gonna make Jasmine much more difficult. Of course, Dig 1 hits both Magnemites, but the Steelix is taking about a third from it, and that is only when Raticate gets a critical hit with Dig. Otherwise, it looks like Steelix is going to be a 4 hit, and this gives Jasmine ample time to use a Hyper Potion, healing it to full. Either I have to bank on multiple misses from Iron-Tail, or I need a new strategy altogether. One thing I can do is fly back to Goldenrod and then head south to this little secluded area where I can fight these 3 trainers and grab myself the Soft Sand, improving Dig's damage by 10%. I also do some additional training at sea to level Raticate up to 38 over a damage rounding threshold. Now it's 3 levels higher than Furret was for Jasmine. Because my moveset is dominated by normal type moves, I'm going to teach Icy Wind in the place of Quick Attack. I figured maybe special damage would do more to the Steelix, but first I tested out my damage ranges with Dig. It looks like it is still a 4 hit, which is really disappointing. I get reset after reset after reset, and I have to say, things were starting to feel really hopeless. In the end, I just get a critical hit with Dig, bringing the Steelix down to orange health. It goes for Iron-Tail, and then Jasmine, in a miracle, does not use a Hyper Potion, and I knock it out. This is why I really need to look into how her AI chooses the Hyper Potions, because I figured that would have been a guarantee with her having less than 50% health. In this case, it looks like she might even have less than 25% health, but she chose not to heal, and that gave me the win. For my second playthrough, I will have access to Hidden Power to help Raticate out here, but that might not really aid it very much, because Hidden Power Ground nerfs your HP as well as your attack stat, and the only other Hidden Power types that would be decent against the Steelix would be special types. You might be thinking Hidden Power Fighting. The answer is no. You get 12 in your attack DV, 12 in your defense DV, and 3 in your HP DV. You lose so many stats by doing this that it's just very rarely ever a good choice. I think Hidden Power Fighting is so bad that I don't foresee a single run in all of Crystal ever utilizing it. This Jasmine split was very disappointing. Raticate is now 2 minutes and 51 seconds behind Furret. Now before someone asks me, why don't you use Dynamic Punch against the Steelix? The answer is really simple. Raticate does not learn Dynamic Punch. The only fighting type move that it learns naturally in Generation 2 is Rock Smash. And yeah, maybe that could be an answer, but remember it only has base 20 power, so I would really just be using it to drop the Steelix's defense stat and then deal more damage with another move like Dig. Okay, let's catch up with Furret. Petrol isn't a problem because Raticate has good damage ranges. I'm also able to one-hit the rival's Golbat, which is really convenient. In Ice Path, I pick up the Never Melt Ice. This will boost the damage of Icy Wind against Lance later on. For now, I'm just going to use a Return against Claire, and like was the case with Furret, I'm able to one-hit all of the Dragonairs. So Raticate isn't falling much more behind, it's just kind of holding pace with Furret right now through this section of the game. If I was playing this run live and racing another human being, I would start cutting things and get riskier and riskier with my strategies in an attempt to catch up. After all, if you're behind and playing safely, you're never going to catch up unless the other player makes a mistake or they get hit by some really bad RNG. However, in these versus videos, I never really do that. I try to play as safely as possible, or as safely as I think is required for the first playthrough. So with Raticate, I still pick up the extra rare candies. Although before the league, I did decide to invest in some additional training. I felt like Icy Wind wasn't going to have a good enough damage range against Lance, and I wanted to ensure that Raticate wasn't going to get stuck against a trainer during the league. This brings me to level 50 during the rival battle, which I am proud to say I did not fumble against the Magneton, so no resets here. With that, Raticate is ready for the Elite Four, and in this case, it is more prepared than Furret was. Its slightly higher base attack and level gives it one hits against Will's Xatu, so I don't have to worry about the Executor and the Slowbro like Furret did. Koga's next. This one's fairly straightforward. I one-hit pretty much everything except the Fortress, although I bring it down to red health and then it uses Explosion. It deals massive damage to Raticate and knocks me out from almost full health. Okay, I didn't anticipate that this was going to be a problem. It gets me with a second explosion. I eventually learned that once it's at low-ish health, I should be going for Dig and then maybe it'll explode doing nothing, but then it just chooses Protect, which is really annoying. I chip away at it with Icy Wind, go for Dig one last time, and in this case it explodes when I'm underground. Because of that, I'm able to finish off the Muck as well as the Crobat. Okay, so the reset there to Koga did put me a little bit more behind. Raticate was gaining some time on Furret, after all it had a big slowdown at will, but now I'm not really liking its chances. That said, I have more experience for this run, so I'm going to use my rare candies before I face Bruno, leveling Raticate up from level 52 all the way to 59. I was hoping this was going to give me a good damage range against the Machamp, but it doesn't. It gives me a 30% chance to get the one hit, and you know what happens? Raticate gets it right away. The fighting type never gets to use Cross Chop. Okay, so maybe Karen's gonna slow me down. She does survive a single hit from her turn and use Sand Attack. That's annoying. Luckily, the Vileplume does not survive an attack. And then I have to use Dig on the Gengar, which does massive damage, and it finishes itself off with Curse. I get lucky against the Murkrow with a return hitting, as well as against the Houndoom. Okay, no resets there. I am now only 24 seconds behind Furret. Raticate is slowly salvaging this playthrough, but its prospects against Lance are not great. Like, what's the correct moveset here? I think I'm going to keep Headbutt just for the chance to flinch, but I'm also going to try the Never Melt Ice with Icy Wind against the Dragonites and see what's possible. Gyarados is first, Return gets the one hit, then Dragonite comes in and I choose Icy Wind. It does not have enough damage. However, Thunder Wave misses. The AI has a 25% accuracy debuff whenever it chooses this move, so that's why it happened. The next Dragonite comes out. I went for a Return to see if it would do more damage when compared with Icy Wind, but it doesn't. As a result, Raticate gets paralyzed and the Dragonite squeezes in a Hyper Beam before I knock it out. But the fact that all of Lance's Pokemon are going to damage me before I knock them out, and sometimes I miss turns because Raticate is fully paralyzed, as a result I have a loss just past the Aerodactyl when Charizard comes in. I tried one more time with the current strategy, but it isn't working out. I need a way to play around Paralysis, so I teach Rest in the place of Headbutt. Now, healing with Raticate is not fun because it doesn't have very much HP or defenses. That said, Lance's Dragonite are not great. They have Hyper Beam, which can miss. It does on the turn that I choose to go for healing. Then it Hyper Beams again, which it has to recharge. That gives me some time, and I can strike back with Return, knocking it out and have green health with no status condition. Aerodactyl might be a rock type, but Return is doing the most damage even when compared with Icy Wind. I'm able to two-shot, move on to the Charizard, and against it, Return is able to one-hit. Okay, only the final Dragonite is left. I need to survive a hit here from either Outrage or Hyper Beam. In this case, Dragonite chooses the more powerful move, Hyper Beam, and Raticate pulls through with 9 hit points. I get one more return in, and Lance's ace faints. Okay, Raticate made it past Lance. That was a little bit messy. Honestly, I don't really like that strategy either. Maybe Hidden Power Ice is the right choice? It is an amazing hidden power to go for after all. The gap between Furret and Raticate has once again widened since Karen, now the Kanto Regional Rodent, is 1 minute and 32 seconds behind. I'm going to be honest with all of you here, this is not the position I was hoping the Raticate would be in by this stage of the game. I was really hoping it was going to be significantly ahead because its late game prospects are not nearly as good as Furret's. As Raticate goes up against Blue, let's talk about why. In this case, the moveset I'm using is Return, Rest, Curse, and Dig. The lack of amnesia means that Pokemon like Alakazam, Gyarados, Exeggutor, and Arcanine can hit for significant damage against my special defense stat. Also, Price's badge is glitched, so it doesn't give me a boost to this stat, further weakening Raticate's prospects. Now, if you're paying attention really closely, whenever I use Amnesia with Furret, it actually toggles the special defense boost on and off. If my special defense stat with +1 or +2 is above 205, then I get my special defense boost, but if it's lower than this, I don't get my boost. So Furret is not only setting up with Amnesia, but it is also activating a badge boost that Raticate is never going to get access to. I was thinking that this might cause some problems against Blue, but the Alakazam doesn't do very much damage with Psychic. After all, I am very overleveled by this point. The Rhydon goes down to a single dig after hitting for double damage with Earthquake, and then against the Gyarados I take my time healing with Rest. This isn't a great scenario because now it has time to set up with Rain Dance and hit with a boosted Hydro Pump. Also, it gets a critical hit during this, bringing Raticate back down to yellow health. However, at the critical moment, it chooses Twister, which I have no idea why it did, and that gives me the knockout. From there, I'm able to one-hit with Return on the Exeggutor, as well as on the Arcanine, and defeat Blue on my first attempt. Okay, so Kanto overall was good for Raticate. It is gaining back some time against Furret. Now, I'm only 56 seconds behind. But Red is coming up next, and really the only thing I can do here is give Raticate Protect in the place of Dig. On the first turn, I could cancel out Charm, but I decided to just go for Return right away to one-shot the Pikachu. I continue attacking against the Espeon, and this is where I realize that Raticate is going to struggle. It does not one-shot the Psychic type, and then it takes more than half damage from the Espeon's attack. Luckily, with this amount of health, the Snorlax still sets up Amnesia, giving me some free curses before it strikes with Body Slam. Okay, maybe Raticate isn't going to struggle after all. If it can set up fully against the Snorlax and then rest once without the Snorlax getting a critical hit, I think I'll be able to sweep the remaining 3 Pokemon. It takes a while, and the battle against Snorlax is very stressful because it can both paralyze you and crit. Just so you know how dire the situation really is, if the Snorlax crits, it does between 97 and 114% damage. So there is a chance my full HP Raticate would survive one crit, but if it's taken one Body Slam, the Snorlax is gonna get the knockout. Eventually, the tension subsides, I get a return in, and the Sleepy Bear faints. Next, Red sends in Venusaur, and instead of charging its Solar Beam, it goes for Sunny Day. This is definitely the play that is better against Raticate, because now Charizard's Flamethrower does boosted damage, and while I do survive, I have 30 hit points remaining. Return one-shots, but Blastoise still remains. Because of the Sun, it's going to see that Surf is dealing less damage when compared with Blizzard, so it is going to use the Ice-type move, which has a 30% chance to miss. If Blastoise misses, I win. If it doesn't miss, I lose. And Blizzard hits. Okay, I tried the fight setting up Curse only once in the hope that I would outspeed the Venusaur and the Blastoise, but Raticate is just slightly too slow. Once it gets -1, it has 139 speed, and Venusaur has 148, and Blastoise has 145. There is another way to play this though. If I want to avoid crits from the Snorlax, I can instead set up on the Venusaur, by alternating Protect whenever it's attacking me, and Curse whenever it's setting up its own Solar Beam. There is a downside to this strategy though, because eventually it just chooses Sunny Day, and then I'm going to have to attack, and it gets a Solar Beam in before it goes down. As a result, the Charizard just knocks me out with Flamethrower. Next, I experimented with Sleep Talk. Maybe attacking while I'm asleep is the better choice. I can set up against Snorlax, improving my defense against its physical attacks, and then, while I'm asleep, hopefully I can attack the remaining Pokemon on his team. But still, my speed and my low special defense stat is the problem. I went with a really weird strategy: Return, Rest, Sleep Talk, and Protect, hopefully not setting up Curse to retain my speed throughout the fight, but this doesn't work work out either. In this case, I don't even make it by the Snorlax. I tested Shadow Ball against the Espeon to see if maybe this would give me enough damage to one-shot, but no, it still isn't. That brings me to this battle where I have 14 resets with Raticate, the exact same number that Furret got in its first playthrough. However, with the Rat, my time is higher, so it's just not performing as well, largely because it's struggling here against Red in the late game. I said at the beginning of the video that we're going to examine a conventional strategy and an unconventional strategy. In this case, Raticate is going to need to play very unconventionally, but I didn't figure that out in the first run. The way I end up winning here is with a little bit of luck. The Venusaur goes for Solar Beam, so it doesn't set up the Charizard. As a result, I take less damage, but I'm also going to buy time with Protect, stacking up the leftovers healing. I can do this again against the Blastoise, and then, because I'm on low health, but it still sees that it has a chance to KO me, it goes for Surf. Raticate survives on 12 hit points, gets a return in, and Blastoise faints. In its first playthrough, it gets a time of 1 hour, 29 minutes, and 21 seconds, with 14 resets, 0 blackouts at level 72, with a game time of 5 hours and 2 minutes. This result puts it 7 minutes and 48 seconds behind Furret's first playthrough. Looking at the timelines for these two playthroughs, I think it's pretty clear where Raticate struggles: Jasmine and Red. Comparing the game times of these two playthroughs, Raticate only starts getting behind at the Jasmine split, and then from there it's never able to regain an advantage. This graph is also very similar to the levels by trainer graph. Raticate does pull ahead a little bit for Will, but then by the end of the game it is still a higher level once it defeats Red. Here are the run summaries for these first two playthroughs. I'm going to make an effort to include these graphics in most Versus videos from here on out on the channel, just because I think they're such a good way of visually condensing a lot of information from a full playthrough. After all, I invented this way of visually displaying movesets and items and levels and rare candies so that I could plan these runs and then memorize how to complete them more quickly. With the first runs behind us, now we need to get into some optimization and see what these Pokemon are truly capable of. Because of the discrepancy in times, I continued playing these Pokemon in the same order, so I'm going to start by optimizing Furret and then later take on Raticate. And believe me, I just can't wait to describe the strategy that ends up working for Raticate to all of you. It's so amazing. Anyways, first we have to do the boring stuff with Furret. The early game is very straightforward. I fight only minimum battles and then defeat Falkner. This is always consistent because Furret has access to Defense Curl. That said, Bugsy is a little bit more tricky, so in Union Cave I pick up the TM for Swift. I would have liked to be able to skip this, but I think it is required for him. As you can see here, his Scyther is still quite formidable, and even with Defense Curl, I need to have as much damage as possible. Both these runs still have the possibility of resetting on the rivals, Ghastly. There's nothing I can do about that, but it's still quite unlikely. In my first run against Whitney with Furret, I ran Headbutt, Defense Curl, Ice Punch, and Dig. This is a very unfocused set. Headbutt can cause flinches, Ice Punch can freeze, and Dig can break Rollout's combo, plus Defense Curl means I take less damage from the physical move from the start. For this second playthrough, I wanted to be more focused with my implemented strategy. So north of Goldenrod City, I pick up the Rollout TM. This move combos really well with Defense Curl because when you set up your defense with it, it boosts Rollout's damage by 1 stage, as if you had just started attacking on the first turn. So now I have both a defense boost and increasing damage with Rollout every turn for the Miltank. I also still have Dig, so I can break its combo if I get unlucky and miss with Rollout. But I don't, and I stomp Whitney. This battle took around 14 seconds to complete with the Rollout strategy, whereas with my previous strategy it took 22 seconds to complete. 8 seconds doesn't seem like a lot of time, but believe me, Furret is pushing for greatness, so any small advantage it can get really matters. Okay, let's talk about the rival in Burned Tower. I'm first going to go to the Lighthouse to defeat the trainers here. I have said that this is suboptimal, and I do agree with that, but for Furret, I think the extra training matters. If I didn't make this excursion, then Furret would arrive at the rival at level 22 and have only a 6.6% chance to one-hit the Haunter. Because of that, I would get cursed, and even if I taught Fire Punch, I would not be able to one-hit the Magnemite. So I have to rely on Dig for it, meaning I would take curse damage, then Headbutt has a small chance of not one-shotting the Zubat, and I'm gonna 3-hit the Bayleaf, unless I get favorable damage rolls, and in that case, I have a 13.7% chance to 2-hit. Doing the extra training brings me up to level 24, 2 levels higher. I now have a 30.6% chance to one-hit the Haunter, a guarantee on the Magnemite and the Zubat, and a 2-shot on the Bayleaf. So even if I get cursed in this scenario when I don't one-hit the Haunter, I can still win. By the way, if you want to play really safe, just level up one more time to 25 where you one-shot the Haunter every time, but I didn't think this was necessary and I didn't want to take the time loss. Morty's next, and this is another synergy because going to the lighthouse gives me access to the mint berry, and in this case it saves me because he hypnosises me with his Gengar. If you're wondering why I'm not using rollout here, the answer is pretty simple. It does not one-shot the first Ghastly, so it could curse me, and from there if I miss and get hit by a hypnosis, things could get very bad. Dig is just more consistent, even though it's a little bit slower. With the 4th badge obtained, let's talk about hidden power and suboptimal routing in the mid-game. If you have to pick up hidden power, it is suboptimal, because this is not required by the game, and with Furret, which has such a good late-game moveset and a decent mid-game moveset with all the punches, I didn't actually think I needed hidden power, so I'm once again running a perfect Furret with hidden power Dark. That means I have no incentive to go over to the Lake of Rage, but instead I want to face Chuck first, because access to Fly really speeds up the mid-game. If you face Price and the Rocket plotline before Chuck, you're really just doing that because you need to be extremely safe against him. For example, Onix, which gets one-shot by Surf from the Poliwrath, it really needs the extra levels, so doing Price first makes sense. But in this case with Furret, it's more than capable of taking on the Fighting-type Gym Leader 5th. By the way, things can go wrong for me here because the Hitmonlee inside of the gym can hit like a truck with things like Double Kick and Jump Kick. I'm left with 5 hit points, so the Hitmonchan finishes Furret, and I have to do the Tag Team Trainers again. That said, the Hitmonlee doesn't always do this amount of damage, so I can make it through this battle. For Chuck, my damage ranges aren't great at level 30. I have a 2-hit on the Primeape and a 3-hit on the Poliwrath. Well, a 91.3% chance to 3-hit the Poliwrath. That said, Furret is outspeeding. It also survives a Dynamic Punch, which only deals between 78 and 92% damage. So while more levels will slightly improve the Chuck fight, they're not going to give me a 2-hit on the Poliwrath, and I already survived the Dynamic Punch, so this feels like the best possible level to fight him at. Also, it creates this fight, which is absolutely hilarious. Chuck lands a Dynamic Punch. I have a Mint Berry, so that's not helpful. Furret then takes his Poliwrath down to low health. I hit myself in confusion, going down to 1 hit point, and yeah, the Poliwrath just misses Dynamic Punch and I finish it off. That puts Furret 2 minutes and 39 seconds ahead of its former pace. I lost a little bit of time between Morty and Chuck, but that's only because of the Tag Team Trainers, and I was expecting to have 1 reset here. For the next portion of the game, I'm going to change up my moveset. Fire Punch in the place of Defense Curl, and Ice Punch in the place of Rollout. I arrive at Price with this set, and I didn't expect to have problems, but I'm just barely not two-shotting the Dugong. And in order for this to happen, I have to get a bad roll, because I have a 90.8% chance to get the 2-hit with Headbutt. So I rolled bad damage, didn't get the 2-shot, then Piloswine comes out, and it chooses Blizzard, getting a critical hit. Whenever Price wins, it's always so disappointing. Anyway, that normally won't happen. I should 2-hit the Dugong. This time I get the crit and Piloswine goes down after wasting its first turn setting up with Mist. Even though I had a reset there, I have gained time. I'm now 3 minutes and 41 seconds ahead. Jasmine is next, and this one isn't as simple as you might think it is. I have guarantees with Fire Punch against the Magnemites, but the Steelix is only a 27.2% chance to 2-hit. I'm most likely going to get a 3-hit, meaning unless I get a critical hit, she's probably going to use her Hyper Potion. The thing is, Iron Tail is going to 3-hit me, so I'm basically gambling for 1 Iron Tail miss. If I can get that, I will have the damage I need to finish off her Steelix. I have 1 reset here, and then in the second fight I realized I could do something slightly differently. I can dig first turn to do chip damage to the Steelix, then attack it with Fire Punch, hopefully reducing the chance that she uses her Hyper Potion. And after that, I can knock it out. And she doesn't heal, so I get a win with only 1 reset. Okay, I wish I could say I crushed the Rocket plotline, but I don't, for it gets stopped because of accuracy dropping moves. At level 37, I don't have guaranteed 1-hits on any of the coughing that the Executive has. Yes, Dig does not one-shot, it is only slightly better in terms of raw damage when compared with Headbutt, and the normal type move is far superior because it has a chance to flinch. Having a loss here is annoying, but it's not the worst thing in the world. By the way, I am going to do a 3rd Furret playthrough because I think it deserves another one. This one has been a little bit too inconsistent throughout the mid-game. For now though, let's just keep going and talk about strategy and damage ranges. I have everything I need against Claire. I'm still 3 minutes and 11 seconds ahead after I defeat her. With the gym challenge complete, I now need to start my preparations for Bruno. Well, in this case, it's more honest to say my lack of preparation. I'm not going to fight any optional trainers before I get to him, but before the league at level 47, I'm going to use 5 rare candies to boost Furret up to level 52. This way, once I beat Will and Koga, I'm level 53 over a damage rounding threshold to take on Bruno. This feels like the perfect level because I have a 97.6% chance to 1-hit the Hitmontop and guarantees on the other Hitmons. With Ice Punch, I have a solution for the Onix, which is going to come out after his Machamp. My planning here centralizes around his damage ranges. Hitmonchan's Mach Punch does 20 to 24% damage and Cross Chop does 66 to 77% damage. So if they get maximum damage rolls, I will lose, but if they get anything under that, I should survive with a small amount of health and finish the Machamp off. Unfortunately for me, in the first battle, they do get maximum damage rolls and Furret faints, but in the second battle, I survive the cross chop and knock out Machamp. By the way, look at Furret's health, it has 21 HP. This is why I keep mentioning the Onix, because if I just barely am surviving the Machamp, then the Onix can do chip damage with something like Sandstorm and potentially knock my Pokemon out. Having a one-hit with Ice Punch is really convenient. Okay, Karen gets annoying because the Umbreon confuses me and then Furret hits itself and gets hit by Stun Spore on the Vileplume. This is a quick reset and one that isn't really avoidable because I'm not able to one-shot the Umbreon. Training up to a higher level to do that is just out of the question, it would take far too long. For example, to get a guaranteed one-hit on the Umbreon using Return, I need to be level 69. Okay, Lance, this fight's really simple. Amnesia, so his special moves don't do very much damage. I have Rest to counter out Paralysis, and Ice Punch for the Dragonites. In this case, Ice Punch does do more damage when compared with Return, but it's still not a one-hit. The reason I'm using it is for the secondary effect. If I freeze, then I dodge Paralysis, and the fight's a little bit easier. It doesn't look like Furret is dominant in this fight, but it is very straightforward, and I win on my first attempt. That puts this run 7 minutes and 55 seconds ahead of my first one. And now let's skip ahead to the very end, because Furret's strategy is simple. Return, Rest, Curse, and Amnesia. The only way I lose is if the Pikachu crits me. This happens right away in the battle against Red, so I have some demo footage for you. If it doesn't crit me, I set up for free and then sweep his team. Now, prepare yourself, because when his final Pokemon faints, Furret gets a time of 1 hour, 12 minutes, and 1 second. It did this with 7 resets. Yeah, 7 resets. Just to provide some context, let's bring up the tier list. Granbull has a time of 1 hour, 9 minutes, and 33 seconds. It did have 8 resets. It was fairly inconsistent to achieve that time. Clefable has a time of 1 hour, 10 minutes, and 9 seconds. And Ursaring has a time of 1 hour, 10 minutes, and 31 seconds. There's then quite a large gap between Ursaring and Feraligatr, which has a time of 1 hour, 14 minutes, and 39 seconds. So Furret, on its second playthrough, after having some sloppy resets in the mid-game, which were mostly luck-based, gets a time that is 4th place overall. That means our top 4 spots are all going to be normal types. I think we should have all expected this. Normal types are fantastic in Pokemon Crystal. That said, I did mention I was going to do a 3rd playthrough with Furret because I was annoyed by the fact that I had some weird resets in the mid-game. I wanted to smooth all of that out and see how fast this thing could truly go. With the experience of the mid-game from the previous playthrough, I made one key change, and that is before Jasmine at level 35, I'm going to use 5 rare candies. This massively improves Furret's damage with Fire Punch against the Steelix so that now I have a guaranteed 2-hit. There is essentially no way that Jasmine can win. Even if Iron Tail gets a critical hit, its maximum damage is only 66%. What that means is that the player has to make a blunder in order to lose when using this strategy. Using my candies this way also smooths out Petrol's coughing. Headbutt now has a 42.5% chance to knock each one of them out in a single hit. Combine that with the 30% chance to flinch, and this fight is much more consistent. Plus, I'm also over level 38, so I have Rest from the beginning in case I need to heal Poison. Now I make a small player error here, which ends up in a reset. I taught Ice Punch in the place of Fire Punch before fighting Claire, but I really didn't need to do that. I'm going to be using Return on all of her Pokemon anyway. The reason this is a mistake is because Fire Punch or Dig would be helpful against the rival's Magneton to avoid Thunder Wave. When I do get paralyzed, the fight ends up in a loss, so that's my first reset in my 3rd playthrough. This strategy of using rare candies before Jasmine also comes with a setback, and I should mention the fact that I did not pick up the Whirl Islands candy or the Mount Mortar candy. So I'm going into the battle against Bruno at only level 51, leveling up to 52 after the Hitmontop. Skipping these 2 candies does make Bruno more dangerous, but I still have a chance to survive his hits. Mach Punch is dealing 21 to 25% damage, and Cross Chop is dealing 71 to 84% damage. So it's a lower chance probability that I'll survive, but I also have a chance for him to miss with Cross Chop. In this case, after 1 reset, I survive the Cross Chop and win. No resets to Karen, which is fairly lucky. From there, I just barely make it through Lance with the same strategy and make it to the late game. Okay, so Pikachu's the only thing that can ruin my day right now. I am 12 minutes and 10 seconds ahead going into this battle. I am completely completely dominating my former playthrough, and Furret looks poised to get a time under 1 hour and 10 minutes. Pikachu is a bit annoying, paralyzing me multiple times. I have to use rest so I'm not missing moves. That said, if I'm at full health and it crits, I have a chance of surviving. Thunder only deals between 87 and 103% damage. In this case, I get fully set up, and from there the sweep begins. Return one-shots all of his Pokemon, and by the time the Blastoise goes down, Furret clocks in with my personal best in Pokemon Crystal, 1 hour, 8 minutes and 38 seconds, with 2 resets at level 65, with a game time of 4 hours and 24 minutes. Let's bring up the tier list and place Furret. Today it earns itself the top place spot, beating out Granbull, Clefable, and Ursaring. So, the regional rodent is the king of the normal types so far. You might be curious, maybe Granbull's resets are the reason it didn't outperform Furret, but Furret's game time of 4 hours and 24 minutes is still faster than Granbull's game time of 4 hours and 32 minutes. And of all the Pokemon currently ranked in my tier list, Furret does have the best game time. So I think it really does deserve this spot, at least for now. Comparing the timeline graphics for all of Furret's playthroughs, you can really see how each successive attempt I was able to shave off a small amount of time in the mid-game. It's more prominent between runs 1 and 2, but then the real time savings for round 3 all accumulate by the time I reach Red, which I do before I even beat Blue during my second attempt. This effect is largely due to the small resets which cropped up throughout the mid-game of run 2, whereas that didn't happen to nearly the same extent during the third run. Of course, it's possible for Furret to get a better time, but I think I've made my point with this third playthrough. And I really want to move on to Raticate, because this is the moment I have been waiting for. I really want to talk about the process that was optimizing this thing, because unlike Furret, Raticate really doesn't want to get a good time in Pokemon Crystal. Now we're going to have an extended section here where I bemoan all of the things about this thing that just make it a terrible Pokemon for a solo challenge, at least a solo challenge where it's going to get a good result. Before that, I just want to say I like Raticate. I think it has a good design. It's cute. It's a great regional rodent in Generation 1. It actually performs decently well there, but everything's different in Crystal. Initially, it seems like it's not that bad. Falkner is easy, but Bugsy is not straightforward. If Raticate gets poisoned, then the damage from Fury Cutter as well as the poison damage is just too much for it, and it can have a reset here. Unlike Furret, it doesn't have access to Rollout, so that strategy isn't possible against Whitney. Instead, I have to rely on things like Headbutt for flinches or Dig to break Rollout's combo. Like Furret, I take a similar approach, going to the Lighthouse first so I have better damage ranges against the rival in Burned Tower. Morty's easy because Dig is super effective and I have the Mint Berry, so now let's talk about Chuck. This is the point in the game I assumed things would get easier for Raticate, but my assumptions were all wrong going into this video because Raticate doesn't actually have that much more attack when compared with Furret, so I am still going to be 3-hitting Chuck's Poliwrath. And because my damage ranges are only slightly better, the trainers in the gym can also cause problems and give Raticate resets. Luckily for me, Raticate's special defense is quite good, so price isn't as problematic. But this is where everything falls apart for the rodent. For Jasmine, my strategy was quite straightforward. Level up from 35 to 40 to deal half damage to the Steelix. This way I can finish it off using a combination of Super Fang as well as Dig after she uses a Hyper Potion. The thing is, that just doesn't give me a straightforward win. The Steelix can still defeat me. In the end, I only barely pull through, so I'm gonna need a new solution for this in my follow-up attempts. Luckily for Raticate, trainers like Petrol are easier because it has higher damage ranges, but they're still not quite good enough to one-shot things like the rival's Golbat, so I get confused and then paralyzed and everything falls apart and Raticate gets a reset here. If you're watching these playthroughs and you've watched my older content, you're probably thinking, wow, these Pokemon are really inconsistent. So many resets, especially for a follow-up playthrough. Yes, this is because I am trying to go as fast as possible with these Pokemon. I am cutting so much that I normally would do for consistency or safety. I'm really trying to give Furret and Raticate both their best possible times in these games. And to do that, you need to get a little bit risky. If both of these Pokemon just spend a little bit more time and level up, while their end result will be worse, they'll have a more consistent time and the runs look better with less resets. But really the only looks I care about are their final real-time finishes, so resets are acceptable to me as long as I'm making it through the game at a decent pace. Okay, so speaking of pace, we're just gonna gonna jump ahead now to Bruno. I'm playing essentially the same as Furret did, so I've arrived here at level 51. Unfortunately for Raticate, with its lower defense stat and HP stat, it is not able to survive the hit from Hitmonchan's Mach Punch and then the follow-up Cross Chop. So I have to rely on a flinch from Headbutt or a miss from Cross Chop. Those are the only two ways that Raticate wins at this level. There are some obvious questions to ask here. What level does Return need to one-shot the Machamp? Well, level 60 gives the guarantee. Level 59 gives a 90% chance, 58 gives a 73.7% chance, and 55 gives a 28% chance. I didn't feel like 4 additional levels of training was worth it to get this low of a chance, and going all the way to 58, which is 7 levels higher, seems very excessive. Especially when Jasmine is such a concern in the mid-game, training to level 40 before Jasmine to save my rare candies for this point in the game just doesn't seem like a good way to get an excellent time with Raticate. This is also the reason I kept playing throughout the mid-game resets, because I know that if I make it through Bruno with only 1 or 2 resets, that Raticate will be on pace for a really good finish time. It is of course worth stating that Raticate is taking more risks in order to achieve this when compared with Furret, and that fact is going to be more than obvious by the end of this video. The place where this second run really fell apart was Lance. Using the rest strategy here is not nearly as good as it is with Furret. Headbutt for flinches hopefully will prevent some Thunder Waves, but it just doesn't work out for me over and over again, and I get up to a total of 10 resets by the time I finally defeat the champion. Still, this result is 9 minutes and 33 seconds ahead of its former pace, and it's still on track for a decent finish time. That is, until it starts having problems in Kanto. The first one comes against Blue. I set up with Curse here and then I'm using Return to sweep his team, but I take too much damage, largely because Sandstorm deals 1/8 per turn. Then I get hit by Gyarados' Hydro Pump and I don't have enough HP to survive the Sandstorm. I made a key mistake there though. Against the Rhydon, I used Dig when I should have used Rest to heal my health so that I had more available to me when the Gyarados comes out. By doing this, it'll set up Rain Dance, not doing any damage, and I can defeat Blue's final 2 Pokemon. I lost some time there, but Raticate is still 8 minutes and 34 seconds ahead. And this is where it all falls apart. It all falls apart at Red, which is so frustrating. Many normal types struggle with this. They get to Red and then they just don't really have a solution. For example, Ursaring is too slow, and it just always felt inconsistent against Red, and Raticate feels very similar to that, but speed isn't the problem. Instead, in this case, Raticate doesn't have the attack stat it needs. Plus, if I use just 1 curse to improve my attack, then I am slower than all of his special attackers. The only Pokemon I now outspeed is the Snorlax. Plus, with Raticate's low defensive stats, it takes so much damage from Body Slam, and establishing Curse is difficult. What this usually means is I can get in 1, 2, maybe 3 curses against the Snorlax before I have to use Rest. I'm taking so much damage that I have to use additional Protects and Rest to gain back health, and this gives Snorlax more and more chances to attack with Body Slam. The more it does it, the more likely it is to get a single critical hit. And as soon as it scores one of these, it will get the one-shot. Body Slam deals between 103 and 121% damage with a crit. There is a complicating matter in this fight. While I can one-shot the Pikachu, I cannot one-shot the Espeon. Again, Shadow Ball is not a solution here, it still doesn't one-hit. This gives Espeon 1 chance to use a move. If it chooses Reflect, then I knock it out in 2 turns and I can set up against the Snorlax while it goes for Amnesia on the first turn. But if the Espeon chooses Psychic, then the Snorlax sees that I'm at low health and it just goes for Body Slam right away, foregoing the Amnesia. If it does this, I cannot set up Curse enough and I'm going to lose. So during this painful playthrough, after reset, I slowly learned that if Espeon uses Psychic, I have to reset. If he uses Reflect, then I have a chance of defeating the Snorlax. But I have to do that by dodging crits. Now what makes all of this truly feel hopeless is that even when I defeat the Snorlax, I then have to contend with a Venusaur, a Charizard, and a Blastoise. Venusaur is first. The play that I'm hoping for, yes, luck after defeating the Snorlax, is that it's going to choose Solar Beam. If it doesn't, and it sets up Sunny Day, then the Charizard deals massive damage with Flamethrower, and while I do survive, the Blastoise is just gonna knock me out. I can use Protect to try and gain back health, but that is fruitless because it's still gonna one-shot when it attacks. The only hope I have of winning here is that Blizzard misses, but it doesn't, so I take my 20-second reset. And it takes a while until I get the luck I need. After 25 resets, finally Venusaur does not use Solar Beam, I move on to the Charizard, tank the Flamethrower with just under half health. I level up, gaining some health back and regain a little bit more with leftovers. I can use Protect for one more turn of health gain, and then Blastoise sets up Rain Dance. Because of this, my return hits and Red is defeated. Raticate gets a second playthrough time of 1 hour 22 minutes and 29 seconds, with 25 resets at level 67, with a game time of 4 hours and 24 minutes. Oh hey, look at that, that's the exact same game time that Furret got in its third attempt. So it seems to me, if Raticate gets no resets, it should perform similarly, if not exactly the same, to Furret. But getting no resets with this thing is a tall order. This is the reason I do not use game time to rank Pokemon in my tier list. If you look at the third playthrough that I did with Furret and just compare that dominance to this second Raticate playthrough, I think you can see the difference. While they have the exact same game time, they are nowhere near each other in terms of capabilities in defeating the game. One concession I will make here is in a tool-assisted run, I think that Raticate is the better Pokemon. Higher attacking stats just make it better. You can roll better damage ranges, get more one-hits, that sort of thing. But that's not how I play these games. These are not tool-assisted runs. I play the game start to finish every time and I take the luck that it dishes out to me as I go. So let's try again with Raticate, in a third playthrough. This time I go with Hidden Power Ice throughout the mid-game. The reason I'm making this choice is because it deals special damage, which is neutral against the Steelix. It does between 31 and 37% damage per hit, so I have a 74.4% chance to 3-hit. This is an improvement over Dig's 26 to 31% damage, but I still do need 5 rare candies to make this fight anywhere near consistent. And even then I get a reset to Jasmine. I had earlier resets in this playthrough. This is not the last time I'm gonna play Raticate today, so yeah, buckle up because there is still a lot of pain to come. Again, Bruno is challenging. I'm a slightly higher level this time, but that doesn't improve it in meaningful ways. Raticate still goes down if the Machamp hits a cross chop, so I'm still just relying on flinches and misses. It takes 2 resets before I finally get the luck I need and defeat him. Okay, so it seems like Hidden Power Ice is going to be good against Lance. This is typically the reason I use it. It's decent against Steelix, sometimes helps against Claire, it's pretty good against Koga's Crobat, and then it's quite good against Lance's Dragonites. But when you're a Raticate, even if you hold the Nevermelt Ice, Hidden Power Ice only does between 89 and 105% damage. So I'm still not guaranteed the one hit. In this case though, I just end up going for the Snowy strategy, which is getting 2 critical hits on the first 2 Dragonites. Yep, that's how I beat him. I crit both of the Dragonites that could hit me with Thunder Wave. Okay, so decent Lance. Let's continue through the late portions of the game and watch one of the cringiest fights that you will ever see. So here we are, fighting Brock with my Raticate. I have 4 PP left over on Hidden Power Ice and 5 PP left over on Dig. Now, there is a problem here. You're probably going to realize it. You're going to notice that Dig is my super effective damage against Omastar and Kabutops, and Hidden Power Ice is decent against everything else. But the Omastar has Protect, so if I use Dig, it just uses Protect and foils my attack, and then I have to waste all my PP, and I don't have any attacking moves left over by the time the Onix comes out. Now, I thought I could win by spamming out all of Rest's PP, but by doing that, I waste so much time, and I was wrong. This Onix is a nightmare. It sets up Sandstorm, draining 1/8 of my health every turn, and slowly, and I mean very slowly, as I spam out Rest's PP, I came to the realization that once I run out of the healing move, I'm going to take both Sandstorm damage, attack damage, and recoil damage every turn. So yes, Raticate loses to Brock because of his Onix. Actually, yeah, let me rephrase that. Raticate doesn't lose to Brock. I lose to Brock because I didn't use a PP restoring item before this fight. Okay, so this is a reminder to all of us that we should keep our PPs up at all times. Even when you don't have any performance anxiety because you're facing a trainer like Brock, his Rock Hard Snake can still outcompete you if your PP can't last. Okay, let's jump ahead to Red. I have to say, I hate this fight with Raticate. It is genuinely not fun to play. You're just rolling the dice, praying that you don't get crit, and then hoping for a Solar Beam. I arrived here at a fairly respectable time, although 2 minutes slower than my previous playthrough. Still, if I got good luck, I would have clocked in with the time under 1 hour and 15 minutes, which is quite good for Raticate. That's an S tier finish. But you know, the Snorlax just keeps getting me with critical hits. Eventually, I make it to the Venusaur, it sets up Sunny Day, and then the Flamethrower just obliterates me. Okay, so I should say, there is one small difference that I made in this fight compared to the last one. I have sacrificed some level of consistency against the Snorlax by running the Quick Claw instead of the leftovers. By doing this, sometimes I will move first against the Venusaur, the Charizard, or the Blastoise. And if I can do that against at least one of them, Raticate has a better chance of winning. The problem is, taking more damage from the Snorlax exposes me to risk, especially if Body Slam paralyzes, but overall I'm still just trying to dodge critical hits. It takes a while, and a lot of resets. And finally, after a total of 23, I defeat Red and clock in with my third playthrough time, which is worse than my second playthrough time. 1 hour, 25 minutes and 6 seconds. That's 2 minutes and 37 seconds slower than the previous run, and a disappointing finish at that. So we need to do a fourth Raticate playthrough, and this is where the community stepped in, because I asked on my Discord server for solo running, a link in the description by the way, I asked, what could I do with Raticate to improve its results at Red? I provided my save file, a replay file, and a bunch of damage ranges. And this is where things get really interesting. Up until this point, with Raticate, I have been relying on things like leftovers, return, curse, rest, protect, all of the generic stuff. So now I want you to take a look at Raticate's move pool. Please just stare at it for a second. I want you to tell me which one of these moves is going to be the most important for Raticate getting a good finish time. Maybe someone's thinking Shadow Ball, maybe someone else is thinking Mud Slap. I'm sure there's at least one of you out there, there's actually probably like 50 of you out there that are going like, obviously Defense Curl and Rollout. No, we don't learn Rollout. I mentioned it before. Someone always comments, why don't you teach your Pokemon Rollout? Why don't you teach Onix Rollout? Onix doesn't learn Rollout. I don't know what to do. I've done everything in my power. The move pool is on screen. Raticate doesn't get Rollout. Onix doesn't get Rollout. So what move could it possibly be? And this is where I truly lost my mind, because Austin made a post and he suggested to me that Raticate should use Roar. Yes, Roar, which is actually a TM in Generation 2. I have never once considered it in one of my solo challenges because it seems like such a trash move. In Generation 1 it has no effect, and in this generation it just randomly switches your opponent's Pokemon. So how is this going to help Raticate? Well, it ends up being very useful against Red. Here's how we can use it. We can set up Curse against the Snorlax. Once again, we have to dodge crits. I don't think there's a way around that with Raticate. But if we do dodge crits successfully and rest up to full health, then I can roar out the Snorlax, drawing in either the Venusaur, the Charizard, or the Blastoise. There are some different scenarios here. If the Blastoise comes out first and I'm at high health, it's going to set up Rain Dance, which will nerf both Solar Beam and Flamethrower. That makes things a little bit more consistent for me, and generally I can just sweep from there. If Venusaur comes in and sets up Sunny Day, then I want to roar back in the Snorlax, and hopefully buy time until the weather fades. Then I can knock out the Snorlax, and that's that. The thing is, this strategy is good, but it's also luck-based, and I had a bunch of resets before, so when I finally do clock in, I get a time of 1 hour, 20 minutes, and 5 seconds. With 27 resets. Yes, this is a personal best. I am 2 minutes and 24 seconds ahead of my former time. But I'm still not satisfied with Raticate's finish. Okay, I promised you all unconventional stuff, so here's another unconventional choice. With Raticate, I am not going to run Hidden Power Ice. I am not going to run Hidden Power Dark. I'm not going to run Hidden Power Ground, although I did consider it. Ruining my attack damage ranges throughout the playthrough when I'm trying to go through as close to minimum battles as possible just doesn't make sense. But what does make sense is running Hidden Power Water. This solves 2 Pokemon in the playthrough. It gives me a 2-hit against the Steelix, and it also allows me to knock out Bruno's Onix in a single hit. Because yes, Raticate had problems against the Onix. Like I said with Furret, when it comes out after the Machamp when you've taken damage, sometimes the Onix ruins your day. And with Raticate, it's relying on Return for primary damage or Dig for super effective damage, but then the Onix can deal massive damage to you with Earthquake. So for what I think is the first time on this channel, Hidden Power Water actually has a place in one of these playthroughs. The reason I typically avoid it is because you have 14 in your attack DV, which gives you 7 in your HP DV. So running this Raticate makes it more frail, which does make Red Snorlax later into the game slightly more difficult to defeat. With the Roar strategy and lower HP, running Leftovers makes the most sense for this battle. I reset right away if the Espeon attacks with Psychic, and then if I make it to the Snorlax, I pray it doesn't crit. Still, this fight takes me so many resets, like way too many. And I'm sure some of you are going to be complaining about this, thinking you should just go for a more consistent strategy. The issue with Raticate is that, like, what am I supposed to do? If I want to level up to a point where I'm going to 2-shot all 4 of his final Pokemon and 1-shot both the Pikachu and the Espeon, then I need to be level 80, which is just not going to be competitive with this inconsistent strategy. And even then at level 80, if the Snorlax attacks, it does 35 to 41% damage with Body Slam. Charizard's Flamethrower does 40 to 47% damage, and Blastoise's Surf does 33 to 38% damage. So even with over-leveling, there are still going to be chances for Raticate to lose. Yes, it would be more consistent because I have higher defenses and more HP, but I don't think it's the right choice for this playthrough. In the end, utilizing the Roar strategy with 20 resets, I am finally able to defeat Red in a time under 1 hour and 20 minutes. 1 hour, 17 minutes, and 51 seconds. This is a finish at level 66 with a game time of 4 hours and 29 minutes. Okay, big thanks to everyone who supports me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships. I want to just let everyone know that I have started producing more behind the scenes content for everyone who supports me in this way. I'm also doing streams over on Twitch, and those VODs will be uploaded as members only videos for everyone who supports me. This is just a small way for me to give back to all the people that do make this channel a reality, because without you, financially, it wouldn't be possible. As I move myself towards more ambitious projects, I'm always looking for additional funding, so if you have extra disposable income and you want to see just what can happen within the solo running format, consider supporting me. Okay, let's talk about the tier list finish. For Raticate, I am a little bit disappointed. I wish I could have got a clean run around like 5 to 10 resets, but I just wasn't able to pull it off within the allotted time. Schedules are a reality of what I do here, so yeah, today Raticate's performance isn't good enough to get it into the S tier, but it is still enough for the A tier, although not towards the top of the A tier. Today it earns the spot behind Charizard and ahead of Azumarill in the A tier. Interestingly enough though, this is currently a result that beats out Raikou as well as Ho-Oh, so I guess Raticate's pretty good when you compare it with Pokemon like that. Generation 2 are just such strange games to solo run. Here's the comparison data of the final 2 playthroughs that I did for this video. I did a total of 3 playthroughs with Furret, and it got the best time that I have ever got in Pokemon Crystal, whereas Raticate, with a total of 7 playthroughs, was still not able to get an S tier performance. And this brings me back to the fundamental truth of Generation 2, and that is the fact that movepool is king. The fact that Furret has the punches as well as amnesia makes it vastly outperform Raticate. If you've made it this far, you are incredible. I will see you in my next video.